In a shocking turn of events, Mike Tyson, at 58 years old, struggled to keep up with his opponent 31 years his junior. Who could have seen that coming? He landed a disappointing 18 punches the entire fight. He looked every bit his age. The fight was done as a compelling contest after a couple rounds, and became a simple matter of winding down the clock, which was a very dull conclusion to the whole thing. There was a couple takeaways from the fight, but the most glaring is that time doesn't discriminate. No matter how ferocious you once were, that clock is ticking. What Tyson lost in that ring wasn't so much a boxing match. It didn't feel like a real fight. It felt like an exhibition, but it more symbolized the battle we all fight, and we all ultimately lose against nature itself, because Tyson could not even for one exchange summon the man he once was. Iron Mike didn't make an appearance because he simply no longer exists outside of highlight reels. No doubt in my mind that he was carried. I felt Jake did enough to establish that he could hurt Mike, and he firmly took control. But once he did, I didn't feel he was looking for the finish. It seemed to me he was pulling punches, which I think for Tyson was kind of the ultimate indignity. Jake was comfortable and in control enough and felt safe enough to carry him the distance. As tedious as that was, I think it was the right move from Jake. Some people are giving Jake credit, like he showed Mike respect, or he prioritized Mike's safety. But I think it's also worth mentioning he was protecting his own public image. Knocking out Tyson would have been a terrible decision for him. The possibility of that happening was enough to promote the fight. But as Jake mentioned, in reality, it just wasn't necessary.
At any point, did you start to take your foot off the gas just a little bit because you noticed he was tiring out?
Definitely a bit. You know, I wanted to give the fans a show, but I didn't want to hurt someone that didn't need to be hurt. Yeah, man, thank you for everyone tuning in and coming in. But when someone's just surviving in the ring, basically, it's hard to make it exciting. His age was showing a little bit, and I just have so much respect for him.
I'm surprised Jake admitted that. People who bet on a knockout were not happy, which is fair. It wasn't billed as an exhibition, so the fight was a farce. But promotionally, it seemed to work very well. It crashed Netflix. It broke state records for live audience for a combat sports event. Even as a cash grab, it was very well conceived and had multiple saving graces. Jake Paul reportedly made $40 million, Tyson $20 million. So we can talk about sad spectacle or indignity or the cruel passing of time, but the man made more than $1 million per punch landed. He might have declined as a boxer, but he can still grab cash and cash checks like a 20-year-old. But despite the huge payday, we didn't pay for it. You know, it's rare that you have a cash grab of that magnitude where nobody feels ripped off. Maybe the live crowd.
He made a ton of money, and I know people are mad. You stayed home on a Saturday night, but you didn't pay for it. You know, this is what Mike Tyson, when Mike Tyson shows up, everybody makes money, you know? Jake Paul is, you know, I don't have to tell you guys, you guys know. Mike Tyson is the A+++ side of that thing. And he was right. Jake Paul couldn't do shit to him. So he was right and I was wrong.
And on top of that, they assembled an enormous, likely unprecedented audience. Netflix say it was streamed in 60 million households. And while the main event didn't justify that attention, the co-main certainly did. The Taylor-Serrano fight was outstanding. Amanda is getting so much praise, which she deserves. But I love the way Katie came roaring back in the final rounds. I thought Amanda probably did enough. I think it's tough for her to be 0-2 in that rivalry. She could have won either of those fights. But she has emerged as a kind of a hard-done-by boxing darling, like it has endeared her. And they might go 3. I think Amanda deserves another shot.
2 epic fights, 2 very close decisions, and I'm just proud to be part of such another huge night for women's boxing. But
Do it again?
If she wants, yeah, I have no problem doing it again.
But we can't say in the same breath that it's a fight of the year candidate, but then say it's a robbery, because the fight of the year candidate is a back and forth type of situation. We can't have it both ways. Maybe Amanda eked it out, especially with the point deduction. Can't say it's a robbery though.
So in summary, for all its blatant flaws, and for as much of a joke as the fight was, there were enough redeeming or mitigating factors that I'm not mad about it. The boxing community, especially guys like Oscar De La Hoya, were full of praise for the event.
While watching it, I felt disgusted.
I really think that's so funny. I felt disgust. The whole thing made me sick. After the fight, Tyson mentioned that he might continue. I'm sure he'll feel different after he's reviewed his performance. But he even suggested a fight with Logan. Logan, in typical Logan fashion, quickly reminded us all why we hate him.
Is this possibly the last time for you?
I don't think so. Maybe his brother.
You want to fight Logan? Logan, I think he said you might be next.
I'll kill you, Mike.
No, please.
He's a classless fuck, honestly. A 58-year-old legend of the sport, boxing royalty, has just been embarrassed and carried by a social influencer, and Logan still can't resist showing him who's boss. Jake showed a more appropriate level of respect.
It's such an honor. Let's give it up for Mike, bro. He's a legend. He's the greatest to ever do it. He's the GOAT. I look up to him. I'm inspired by him, and we wouldn't be here today without him. It was really tough, like I expected it to be.
But if you put on a farcical cash grab, there will be repercussions for Jake. Like there's that famous phrase, you can shear a sheep many times, you can skin him only once. Well, this was it. Jake Paul has finally skinned that sheep. Mike Tyson was such a shell of himself that I think fans' willingness to indulge Jake in these types of mismatches against opponents with some clear, ridiculous disadvantage is now exhausted. I don't think they're going to sell Jake Paul versus Roberto Duran anytime soon. So what's next for Jake? And how does he inject some much-needed credibility into things?
People just love to hate me. I'm easy to hate. And I intentionally, I play the heel. I feed into that. That's just what I like to do, and that's what entertainment is. And at the end of the day, I started as a 17-year-old in Los Angeles in the entertainment business. I've been in this sport for 4.5 years and have been so active, doing every event, taking any fight possible. So if people want to see more or this challenge or fight this person, whatever it is, my response to them is just give them a couple more months, because I'm going to accomplish more things in just a matter of months. I plan on doing everything in this sport that there is to be done.
Early on, Jake did well capitalizing on MMA opponents, and to his credit, he initially progressed through increasingly challenging fighters, from Askren to Woodley, and finally Anderson Silva. But after beating Silva, there really was no need to continue with MMA fighters. He'd made his point. Then he legitimately stepped up to take on an appropriate challenge and actually lost to a better boxer in Tommy Fury. Tommy was the perfect opponent because it was a winnable fight for Jake, at least on paper. The highlights I'd seen of Tommy were just not good. And based on the Silva fight, I gave Jake a solid shot. But in the ring, Tommy looked a lot more skilled and ultimately established a clear upper limit on Jake's ability. The reason that fight made sense, though, was that Tommy is a very rare example of a low-level boxer who is also famous. Perfect matchmaking. A real boxer from a great boxing family has a comparable amount of pro experience. He brought some credibility to proceedings, and he could sell the fight. But that's the problem for the problem child. There's not a lot of famous low-level boxers. The MMA well has run dry. The promotional curiosity angle has to have run its course with Tyson. But at the same time, Jake cannot compete with a legit boxer in their prime. So he has a problem. People want Jake to begin taking a traditional route through boxing, like fight his way up the ranks. But I just don't think that's realistic. Jake's career is the reverse of most boxers. Most fighters don't make a lot of money in their early fights. But then in the end, if they make it to the top, they usually have a window to make big money in a handful of high-profile fights. Jake is the opposite. He's not going to the pinnacle of the sport. He's trying to make all his money now, because when he eventually steps up to fight a real boxer in his prime, that's where the train comes off the tracks, likely in devastating fashion. I'm sure his team are completely aware that Jake needs to be fully cashed out by the time he fights a serious guy. So to keep the show on the road, and especially after a farcical fight like last weekend, I think Jake has to find an opponent who's famous enough to sell, skilled enough to pose a reasonable threat, but one he could conceivably beat, or at least compete with. There's not a lot of fighters who fit the bill that fans would respect as an opponent. I mean, Jake is gunning for Canelo.
Canelo needs me, so I'm not even going to try and call him out, but he knows he wants the payday, so he knows where the money man's at.
Canelo is not interested.
Jake Paul getting in there versus Mike Tyson. Does it interest you, and how do you see that fight going down? And
Not at all. Not at all.
not really, not even interested.
No.
Do you think it's good for boxing? Not good for boxing?
No. I think Netflix is good for boxing, but at that special fight, I think Netflix is doing something wrong there. At this point, I'm not interested in that kind of fights.
But Canelo would kill the guy. Beterbiev just called him out. I think only the most sadistic among us would like to see Beterbiev decapitate Jake. Like literally box his head off his shoulders. Jake's head would land in someone's lap in the front row. Any current champions or contenders would be way too much for Jake. Andre Ward is interested, and that's a much more compelling fight than Canelo.
Y'all keep talking about me fighting Jake Paul, man. I'm an old man now. I've been retired 7 years. I ain't touched a boxing gym in 7 years. Why y'all want me to fight Jake? Gotta say my name, though. I can't even entertain it. You gotta say my name. You gotta say my name. We might be able to talk about it. Maybe something I can think about, but it's time that bro start, he gotta fight somebody that's a real threat, because we know he can sell. We know all of that. But what he's after is legitimacy. He's trying to legitimize himself. And Canelo don't take that fight, which he said he wasn't going to do it, man. You got to fight somebody that's going to give you some clout, whether you win or lose. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
Andre Ward is 40, and he's been retired since 2017. He's an outstanding boxer. He's well-known, Olympic gold medalist, undefeated. But he's no longer in his prime. So I think that's how they'll be trying to solve the matchmaking problem. Instead of finding unknown up-and-comers at Jake's level, can they find former stars who have just about declined to around Jake's level? Now, Andre Ward at 40 is not the answer. I think he destroys Jake Paul. But I think finding that line, in a way fans can respect, is the answer. Kovalev is 41. Took a couple losses at the end of his career, looked like a diminished version of himself. He wanted the Jake fight back in 2022.
See, I was going to ask you if you wanted to fight Jake Paul, but it sounds like you want to get another belt.
Fight with Jake Paul, I'm ready, and I would knock him out,
But again, I imagine even a diminished Kovalev administers a vicious ass whooping. I'm not going to go on. I don't think people really care, but I think that is the question his team will be asking. Where is that line? I don't think it's 40 or 41 for fighters the caliber of Andre Ward, but maybe some former champion or contender who's 44 or 45. Honestly, I don't really think people care what Jake does next, but I have to imagine that's how they're going to try and solve the problem. He's also spoken about going to MMA, and he's pointlessly calling out McGregor, who's got 2 more fights in his UFC contract.
What about you and Conor McGregor? Are you interested in that?
Yeah, he'll never do that, though. He knows. He knows way.
One, he's under contract, and
he's
2,
not his own boss.
And 2, he won't do it. He might.
And it's funny to say, Conor McGregor is scared of Jake Paul and will never box him, but it's the fucking truth.
But if he does stay in boxing, I think he has to at least start pushing to avenge his loss to Tommy Fury. That is the fight that would best challenge the growing perception of him as a cherry picker or a bully. Amidst all the easy fights, the older guys and the MMA fighters, Tommy Fury was a legitimate, commendable example of Jake testing the limits of his ability. He lost that fight. So looking for the rematch would be an opportunity for him to show some depth and some character, to show that he's committed to reaching a higher level and overcoming his prior limitations. I mean, no matter what level a fighter is at, this is something people can respect. You failed, but you got back up. You tried to learn from your mistakes. You made some adjustments, and you took another shot. If he could get that win, it would represent clear progress. There would be an element of redemption and validation. Now, I don't think he'll beat Tommy Fury. I just don't think they're on the same level. But he might. And I would absolutely respect the guy for trying.
I didn't really make anything of the fight, I'll be honest. I knew it was going to be exactly like that. I knew they wasn't going to hit each other properly. I knew it wasn't going to be a proper fight. It was a cash grab. Commercially, everything like that, business sense, it was absolutely amazing. Well done to both guys for getting that money in and leaving the ring with not even a scratch. So,
would you take a rematch with him?
With Jake Paul? Yeah, in a heartbeat. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think me and him are set in stone. He's only got 1 defeat, and that's to me. So it's inevitable that we are going to get back in the ring again.
And realistically, if he wants to get anywhere near the level he talks about, he has to at least surpass the level Tommy Fury represents. So if Jake is at all serious, I think that's the fight to make.